All right, here we go again. Welcome back, everybody, to the best weekly true crime podcast on the market. That's Game of Crimes with Murph in the morning. I'm back this week with another fantastic guest, like usual. Her name is Heidi Chance. I'll tell you a little bit more about her in a few minutes. But I do want to say that it seems like the two most popular topics we talk about here on Game of Crimes are traditional organized crime. That's also known as the mafia, the Italian mob, La Cosa Nostra, I don't know, whatever you want to call those people. And the other is human trafficking. Now, I just told her last name is Chance. I don't think Chance is an Italian name, so you can probably figure out what we're going to talk about today, right? Hey, but before I forget, when this episode comes out, I'm going to be on my way to the Southern California Gang Conference. I think this is my 5th or 6th year supporting those folks. And once again, I'll have the portable recording equipment with me to get more interviews out there. This is something that Morgan and I started a couple years ago, and it seems to be very popular. This year I'll be doing it solo. But we always meet some great guests out there with some unbelievable stories. Plus, I get to catch up with some of the prior guests we've had here on Game of Crimes. So I'm hoping to get those updates from them, and I'll have those to you as quickly as I can. Stay tuned. Now, let's just get the housekeeping out of the way real quick. Head over to Spotify or Apple. Hit those 5 stars. Believe it or not, this really helps us supporting the Game of Crimes and the ratings. Send me your comments and feedback. You can do that on Spotify or on our website. I love hearing your thoughts. You folks are great about letting me know what you think about the show, and I'll do everything I can to improve it. Speaking of our website, that is gameofcrimespodcast.com. If you haven't visited that site yet, come on over and check it out. That's where you find all our episodes, our book list that we talk about all the time. There's merch coming soon, a couple other things on there. I mentioned before that Connie's still working on these new items for the merchandise list. It's going to be some new designs, new logos, new artwork, larger selected to choose from. So I'm hoping to get that out here really soon, really soon. Now on social media, on Facebook and Instagram, you can go over to Game of Crimes Podcast. And on X, formerly known as Twitter, you can go to just Game of Crimes. Now, X still didn't let me post anything. I'm not sure why. I've never had a problem with it before. And it's not just Game of Crimes. It's also my DEA Narcos account. I'm starting to get a little fed up with it, to be honest with you. And you may not know this about me, but patience has never been one of my virtues. If you don't believe that, just ask Connie. Okay. Also on Facebook, type in Game of Crimes Fan Club. Yes, come on over and join the best private group that's out there. The page is run by our favorite queen, Sandy Salvato. Now, she's the lady that rules with the iron fist, but she wears a velvet glove. So if she smacks you, it's not going to hurt too bad. But here's the cool thing. It's not all about the Game of Crimes podcast. You'll find a lot of posts and comments. It's just a good place to come over and have fun. I love the way that people look out for one another over there. I just really enjoy being part of the Game of Crimes fan club. So come over and let us know what you think. If you want even more content, you can check us out on patreon.com/Game of Crimes. And just as a heads up, I've still got Patreon on hold until June 1st. So it's coming up. I've got a lot of comments from folks asking me to bring Patreon back. So look out. The first episode's coming out on June 1st. And if you're not familiar with it, that's where we have a lot of things like 911, what's your emergency? We've got a section called You Can't Make This Shit Up. There's a section called the Narcometer where I'll review a law enforcement movie and this and that. For those of you that heard the Miami Vice one, I promise you I'll never do that again. We also have case reviews where I'll talk about different things that are going on in criminal elements, maybe talk about current topics. And one thing I really enjoy is our monthly Q&A, the questions and answers, where you can ask me just about anything. And to my knowledge, I don't think we've turned down a single question yet, and I have no intentions to start now. And I'm kind of playing around with some ideas on new topics to discuss on Patreon. So if you haven't heard yet, I'm asking for your questions now for June's Q&A. So I've got a few already, but get those into me soon. You can send them to me via the Patreon site or the Game of Crimes email address, which is gameofcrimespodcast@gmail.com. So again, it's patreon.com/Game of Crimes. One other site I mentioned earlier, and I want to mention again, and that's the DEA Narcos, NARCOS.com. That's a site that my old DEA partner, Javier Pena, and I have. We have our own speaking business where we tell the true story about Pablo Escobar and his merry band of murderous thugs. On the website, you'll see there's lots of information, lots of pics, a calendar, merchandise. There's a few other things on there. So if you're curious, come on over and check us out on DEANarcos.com. Now, a quick disclaimer. This is a show about crime. We talk about bad people doing bad things and bad people doing bad things to good people. I do take these stories very seriously, but if you don't know me, I never try to take myself too seriously. Well, unless I get on my soapbox about a topic I'm passionate about or something that really ticks me off, but I try not to do that over here. Anyway, since we're at the point now where we do want to start having some fun on Game of Crimes, it's time for one of my favorite sections, and that is Small Town Police Splatter. Now, this is a section dedicated to stupid criminal stories. So here we go. A Kentucky man pulled out a bag of drugs and a wad of cash when police officers asked him for his ID. Come on now, really? David Ratliff, 43 years old, was passed out behind the wheel of his car in the parking lot of a video store in Manchester, about 100 miles south of Lexington, Kentucky. When police arrived at the scene and asked the drugged-out Ratliff for his ID, he whipped out a baggie of meth, pills, and a large sum of U.S. cash. What a freaking moron. He was arrested on charges of trafficking in a controlled substance, public intoxication, and taken to the Clay County Detention Center. Ladies and gentlemen, what's our number one rule here on Game of Crimes? Don't do meth. That's what happens to you. You go to jail when you do. Now, back to my state, Florida. Florida's always in this, right? Kira Enders and her boyfriend, Dakota Jones, allegedly attempted to steal trick lottery officials into giving them a $1 million prize with 2 torn scratch-off tickets spliced together to form a winning ticket. There's just no guessing what's going to come up next. So the 2 tickets were ripped horizontally with the top half of one ticket and the bottom half of the other, then carefully pieced together to show the $1 million prize winner. And this is according to the Pensacola News Journal. But the ticket wasn't fooling anybody, as the failed fraudster forgot to check the serial numbers of the 2 different scratch-offs. I don't think this is going to be a made-for-TV movie type of situation. It was clear to the lottery officials, and obviously clear to us, that she had taken 2 tickets with different numbers. One side had one serial number, the other side another serial number, and that's according to Sheriff Chip Simmons in Escambia County, Florida. Several days afterwards, Enders, 36, after she submitted the ticket to the Florida lottery, she and her boyfriend, Jones, 32, drove to the meet with a lottery agent to follow up about the possible winnings. Instead of being handed a big ticket, the pair was quickly taken into custody and questioned separately once they arrived. Now, you're going to love this. Enders, she claimed that the ticket fell out of her car and it got wet. It was raining. And then she told authorities that she tried to scratch it before it was dry and was forced to tape it together to keep it from getting further damaged. After she was confronted about the mismatching backsides of the 2 halves, she allegedly said, "What? They don't go together?" Oh, well, and then she argued that the tickets, she just didn't have them taped the right way. Well, meanwhile, the boyfriend Jones, he told the same lottery agent the couple found the 2 halves of a wet ticket walking down the road, because I guess, you're dating, you're taking a walk in the rain. Now, he stated that once scratched, the ticket said $1 million. And he was like, "No freaking way, dude. Give me a break." Jones advised that they did not buy the ticket, and he doesn't know what Enders told us, but that's the truth. Then the agent informed him that he told Enders the numbers on the top and bottom were different, which led the boyfriend Jones to reportedly reply that his gal knew they didn't match. What a guy. You know what? He gave her up in a heartbeat, didn't he? I guess male chivalry ain't what it used to be. The 2 were arrested, there's a surprise, this month and charged with forgery, altercation of a lottery ticket with intent to defraud, passing a forged altered state lottery ticket, and grand theft of $100,000 or more. Morons. Okay, and I think we already said that, right? Okay, and since today's guest is from Arizona, I wanted to include an Arizona story. So here's something right out of Scottsdale. Arizona police are hunting for a man who was videotaped urinating through the mail slot of a Scottsdale furniture store. A store surveillance camera recorded the suspect relieving himself last Wednesday morning, according to Sergeant Ben Hoster, spokesman for the Scottsdale Police Department. Cops are investigating the incident as a urinating in public case. Now, they've got this on video. You see the suspect. He's got his dog with him, who's unleashed, just kind of dragging him along, stops, unzips the front of his shorts, urinates in and through the mail slot. The urine soiled a rug and mail on the upscale Atelier store, which sells some upscale products. I can't even pronounce the names of them. Police described the urinator as a muscular white male, mid-20s, 6 feet tall, 200 pounds, with medium-length groomed hair, no visible tattoos, wearing a white with gray striped tank top, turquoise shorts, white slip-on loafers. Now, after viewing the video, the police were really concerned that this might be a case where the evidence would not stand up in court. Okay, I'm sorry. That was pretty bad. But I thought it was kind of funny. Okay, let's get back over to business here. Our guest today, as I mentioned, is Heidi Chance. As you're going to hear, Heidi is a retired law enforcement professional with the Phoenix Police Department. Heidi was nice enough to reach out to me, expressing an interest in being on Game of Crimes. So you know what? I put my investigative skills to work. Yep, believe it or not, I still have a few of those left over. And I learned that Heidi has a ton of experience working in human trafficking investigations. And like I said earlier, you guys love these guests, which makes me happy knowing that all of y'all see this as a major issue that must be addressed the same way I do. I've tried to become a big proponent of bringing awareness to this growing problem of human trafficking. So deciding to have Heidi on here was pretty much a no-brainer. Now, let me tell you, she is a true professional with a ton of experience. One thing I failed to mention, we didn't discuss in her interview, is that there is a national human trafficking hotline number. That number is 888-373-7888. And let me just say right now, if you're a victim of human trafficking, past or present, you need help, call this number. If you think you have information about human trafficking, something you think is suspicious, call this number, okay? Once again, it's 888-373-7888. And I'll mention it again at the end of the episode. Ladies and gentlemen, please, this is that important. Don't wait until something bad happens to you or someone in your family or one of your friends or their families. If you see something you think is out of the ordinary or suspicious, contact the police immediately. Dial 911 or call the national hotline, please. Okay, after all that, I hope you're psyched up about today's episode as I am. Now, if you're ready, and even if you're not ready, you know what you have to do. And that is get in, sit down, shut up, and hold on. Here we go again with the biggest, the baddest, the most dangerous game of all, the Game of Crimes. Hey, all you Game of Crimes listeners out there, thank you for coming back and joining us again. This has been one hell of a start here. Thankfully, I've got a guest who's very patient and understanding. The Riverside platform decided that it wasn't going to work for a while, so we've been kind of playing around and waiting, but it finally came back up. So here we are. Glad to have you back. Have another special guest. As I always say, all of our guests are special, right? But our special guest today is a retired police officer from Phoenix. Her name is Heidi Chance. Now, Heidi reached out to me through LinkedIn. I'm hoping that she's a regular listener to Game of Crimes. She hasn't said that yet, but we'll see if we can coach that out of her here a little bit. And I got to looking at her background, and it kind of falls in line with what we've done here previously on Game of Crimes, and we want to continue to do. In fact, we have other guests that are coming in. Heidi is an expert in human trafficking, and that includes 13 years working undercover as a detective with these pieces of crap that we're going to talk about. Not that we're going to name them because they're nothing more than a piece of crap to me, but she falls in line with a lot of good people that we've had on the show here before. But just to start right off, Heidi, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for your patience today.
Absolutely, no worries.
This Murphy's Law thing, it's just something that I learned to live with. But what you're going to do, right? I don't have much choice on that.
That's
okay. And I haven't told you this, but I reached out to an old friend of yours who I was talking to her about some other things, and I happened to mention your name. And she is a former guest here on Game of Crimes. In fact, she was one of our first guests. Her name is Sherry Oz.
Yeah.
You remember Sherry?
Yes.
She spoke very highly of you. She was the guest we had on episode 17 back in October of 2021. We'd only been up and running a few months then. But you know what? If Sherry gives you the thumbs up, you're good in my book, right?
Oh, good.
Very good. So just to kick things off here, and let's just hope this platform keeps running. You know, Most of the time I joke around about Murphy's Law, but damn, I mean, this is just very frustrating. It's embarrassing when Heidi and I just met right before we had all these issues. So it's a little bit embarrassing. I told her,
That's
don't
all
worry, you're
right.
not working a professional, you're working with a beginner here. So,
That's all right.
well, thank you, Heidi. So to get going here, can you tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, where you grew up, and work your way into how in the world did you get into law enforcement?
Yeah, so I am a Phoenician. That's what we call people who are from Arizona and specifically the Phoenix area.
Okay.
Born and raised. I have no idea what it's like to be in snow. Uh, I'm not sure where you're at, but definitely I don't know anything about snow. I grew up in the Phoenix area. My dad was a Phoenix officer. And then actually I'm third generation. His dad, my grandfather, was NYPD. And
Wow.
so I have it in the blood for sure as far as this legacy of law enforcement.
I love it. And just so you know, I grew up in Tennessee and West Virginia. I had as much snow as I ever wanted to have in West Virginia in the mountains there. I now live in Orlando, and my only regret is I didn't move south sooner.
Yeah.
But third generation, wow, your granddad was New York, is NYPD. Was that where your mom and dad or one of the other is from?
So my dad is from New York originally. Yeah. And just like a lot of people from the East Coast, they moved here because of his health. He had asthma, severely asthma. And so I guess a lot of New Yorkers moved to Arizona for the drier weather here.
Yeah. And just out of curiosity, where's mom from?
Tennessee, actually.
We might be related. You never know.
Yeah. Yeah, you never know.
Do you know what part of Tennessee?
I believe it was Knoxville area.
Okay.
But she was born in Tennessee, but mostly raised in Denver, Colorado area.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was born in Memphis. I grew up in Murfreesboro, just below Nashville there, until I was going into high school. And then my mom and dad were from West Virginia, and they decided to move back. So that's why I say I'm a cross between a redneck and a hillbilly, and I'm good with it. So now, were you born in Phoenix?
Yes. Yeah,
so you've been there your whole
funny.
life.
Yeah, it's funny. My parents are the typical cop meets the nurse. My mom was a nurse and RN, yeah.
Yeah, my wife Connie she's a retired nurse now.
Uh-huh.
Wow. There must be a thing. What's this thing between cops and nurses, huh?
I don't know. There's a lot of them.
You're not married to a nurse, are you?
No.
Okay. Just want to clarify. So you're a product of the Phoenix school system?
Yes.
And in school, did you play any sports?
No, I was more in like student government and then ROTC.
No kidding. Yeah. Army ROTC?
Air Force. I thought I was going to go in the Air Force, yeah.
So what was the attraction to ROTC and specifically the Air Force?
Well, I think it's because that was offered in one of the major high schools that was nearby me. It was Air Force. No particular reason why Air Force over some other branch, but that just happened to be what was offered. And then I did know in high school that I wanted to be a police officer. So I just thought I needed to do something else until I turned 21. So that's where I thought my path was going to go.
Yeah. What would you have wanted to do? So if you had gone into the Air Force, what would your occupation have been?
Security police. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I knew I wanted to be a cop since I was 10 years old. And that was, quite honestly, that's when I had my first run-in with the cops. I'm a preacher's kid, a PK. And, you hear the old saying, PKs are the worst. Well, if you look up preacher's kid in the dictionary, you might see my picture there.
Yeah.
So that was, they got
Same
caught.
with cops' kids.
Yeah, true. So the cops came and picked us up in the middle of the night when we were 10 years old trying to break in a house and took us home. And that ended my camping out career for at least that summer anyway. So what was it that attracted you into law enforcement?
So I think what it is I inherited my dad's knack of being in the right place at the right time. Mm-hmm. And there were two instances that I remember specifically that were ironically both around the same time when I was learning how to drive. And, you have your permit and you have to have your parent there with you. And there were two instances where my dad and I, were basically observing crimes happening right in front of us. So the first one was I would drive us home from where I worked at a yogurt store. Mm-hmm. And so we were passing through the parking lot where the yogurt store was, and there was a shoe store, and there was an armed robbery right in front of us, as far as the suspects running in front to their vehicle that was directly in front of us and jumping in their getaway car trying to leave. And so, of course, my dad looks at me and he says, follow that car. Obviously we didn't follow it out other than enough time for him to, get on the phone and call 911 and get the license plate and direction of travel and some descriptions of people. But, that was one instance. And then the other one, my dad always taught me how it's very important to look down alleys. As a police officer, pay attention to what's happening in the alley. And so our own alley between our street and the street behind us, I happened to look down, and my dad also saw what I saw, 2 individuals jumping into the alley from the backyard of what we found to be the house just west of our house. And so I pulled up out front. He ran inside to get his radio and badge and phone. And for whatever reason, without thinking, fearless little 16-year-old myself drove to the other side of the alley to have my dad's back, be his backup in essence, and cut these people off. And so he's coming in from the other end of the alley, and I'm cutting them off. And so we kind of cornered these 2 suspects, and, he made contact with them. And I definitely, thinking back, put myself in a dangerous situation, but without question and without thinking, I responded. So I think that's kind of where, this whole idea of this is the right path for me to be on is because I made those second decision, really early on in my life.
I bet Dad was proud of that, wasn't he?
No, he was kind of mad at me for kind of being downrange and also confronting these people by myself if he hadn't quickly gotten out there, and he never told me to do that. So.
Yeah. Holy cow! How many teenagers do you know that have that type of excitement in their life at that age?
Yeah, for real.
That's pretty cool. So the first incident, though, you were driving. You're learning how to drive, right?
Yeah.
And obviously your driving skills were good enough that you kept up with the bad guys, because if they just robbed a place, I'm sure they were moving pretty quick.
Yeah, they actually had pulled to the intersection and then noticed us paying attention to them, and they hit like 4 cars trying to get past and made themselves a gap and blew through the light and continued southbound. So, yeah.
Wow. So did the uniforms catch them?
I hope so. I don't even know.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were not there, obviously, in time for them to escape that intersection. So,
well, I wonder if the law enforcement, your mind starts thinking, I wonder if that was a stolen car. Or did they track the tag down?
Yeah, I wouldn't have known, at that time, but it could have been, because they went through a lot of trouble to get the hell out of there. So,
yeah. Oh, yeah. They knew the jig's up. It's time to go.
Yeah.
Now, on the alleyway thing, were those guys, had they just broken into a house? Is that what happened?
Yeah, they were at our neighbor's house. They broke into your house.
Very good. And well, that's very fortuitous that you guys were right there where you were, because even if they'd stolen anything, the property's still there with them. They hadn't had time to get away.
Yeah. That's the right place, the right time.
Wow.
That's the blood that I have.
Yeah. Well, you came by it honestly, right?
Uh-huh.
Do you have any brothers and sisters?
I do. My sister is retired Army. She did Army National Guard. She was in the Gulf War. Then when she came out, she's been everywhere, Germany, Hungary, Bosnia. She came out and she got a position, active Army National Guard. And so she finished out her whole career, in that status. So she was able to get a retirement. And then my brother is an electrician.
Very good. Where do you fall
in the
ranking?
girls in the family are wearing a uniform, I guess.
I like it. Well, hey, some electricians wear a uniform. They got little name tags. That's what their name is.
Uh-huh.
Where do you fall in the pecking order amongst the 3 of you?
So I am middle and first. So my sister's adopted. So after my parents met and my mom was a nurse for a period of time, she decided to become a stay-at-home mom. And then my parents actually took in foster kids and ended up adopting my sister.
Wow.
But also continued to do other foster kids.
Yeah. I love your parents already. That's very
Yeah.
honorable what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you don't know much about me, but my wife and I have two sons from my first marriage, and then Connie's my wife now. We're coming up on our 40th anniversary next week, and we adopted two little girls when we lived in South America.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
were.
Mm-hmm.
Monica was 8 months old, Mandy was 5 months old, and they're now both 30 years old. So it's the reason I don't have any hair right there. I got that big bald spot in the back. You know how you girls are, right?
We're really difficult. Yep.
Well, the funny thing is, when the boys would act up, I could just go right up behind them, right in the back of the head, just give them a little smack right in the back of the head. But you can't do that to a little girl.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of times I wanted to, believe me.
Yeah.
Oh goodness.
Yeah, I actually tried to take in one of my victims as my foster daughter. I had her in my home for 9 months.
So you're an angel on top of everything else.
Well, I tried. I mean, it was one of those where she never really had her father in her world, so I don't think even knew who he was. And then her mom, unfortunately, her mom is a porn star, and in my opinion, didn't have time for her daughter in her life. And she let her, like, after the investigation and we arrested the pimps and everything was concluded, she pretty much let her daughter live in a group home and signed her rights away. And it was one of those where I was like, this little girl, still, she was 15. I think she told me that I gave her first birthday party because I took her to Dave & Buster's and we did her 16th birthday, with some of her friends. And, it was one of those where I just couldn't believe she was going to let her just stay in the group home. Obviously, she put me through a lot and it ended, not on the best in the best way, but I did give it a valiant effort for 9 months as her foster mom. And it was one of those where my husband and I took the classes. I had never been a foster parent before. Background investigation, fixing our house, locking up my guns, everything just for her.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Yeah. How admirable, how heart-wrenching that story is. And you were reading my mind. I was wondering how old she was, what she's been through. What a horrible life for a child to go through.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those where she was just living with whatever random friend or family member while her mom lived her life. And, it's no wonder that she met these guys at a party and they went to go get beer and took her to a hotel, got her high, had sex with her, and then convinced her to become a prostitute. They started this whole business. But the way that she got away from the one pimp, because she was actually sold from one pimp to another pimp, is this pimp kept her held up in an apartment. And she was able to ask him to go get something at the convenience store. And she borrowed someone's phone and called her aunt. And her aunt called the police. And that's how my partner and I met her. And then we traveled over to California to arrest the original pimp and his pimp partner. And I believe they're all still in prison still. But it's one of those where, the reason it ended badly is because she definitely had a drug problem that as a foster parent, this was 2012. I'd never had experience of as a teenager. My son was 10 at the time and I only had the one. So I didn't know anything about a 15, 16-year-old. I didn't know her addiction to drugs was so strong because that's really what did our relationship and her and I, as far as her, getting so into drugs. Yeah. And unfortunately, that's what's, as an adult today, that's her issue right now.
Yeah. So when you and your partner made the initial response after getting the phone call from the aunt, was the piece of crap there?
Yeah, we ended up arresting him, but the problem at that time was, and for these crimes, they're really difficult to prove because it's in essence her word against his.
Mm-hmm.
Usually I'm not going to have a witness that sees her go have sex with somebody, make money, and give that money to their trafficker. And
right.
So all I had was her side of the story. And we took him into custody, did the warrant, but there was no, it was like word of mouth. He didn't really have her advertised somewhere, so there's not evidence there on an ad or anything. The phone didn't have any messages between the two of them because she didn't have a phone, so she was held in this apartment. So really, that was the first and one of the very few suspects that we did an interview with, and I had to let go out the front door of the police station after we were done because we didn't have anything other than her side of the story. He got his, though. He's no longer with us. He's a gang member, and he ended up getting murdered by someone, but it was definitely a situation where we did our best to get justice for her with the original 3 pimps that had her, but the one she was sold to, we were still working on that, but then karma took over. So
I can't think of a better ending to that story as far as he's concerned. And I'm just jotting down a couple of questions here as we talk, so I want to come back to this to probe it just a little bit more, to give our listeners a good idea of how these things develop. I know they've got a million questions. I've never worked a human trafficking case. I've got 100 questions here also, but I want to get back to your upbringing here just a little bit. So you're in ROTC in high school, and you just told me, the listeners don't know this yet, but you told me what age you were hired as a police officer. So tell us about how you graduated and how all of a sudden your career path changed.
Yes, Phoenix Police Department created a cadet trainee program in 6 when I graduated high school. And basically my dad found out about it and he told me about it. So he actually did encourage me to go on that path because he knew I wanted to go in the Air Force to go become a police officer. And so I tested for it. And there were 5 of us initially hired. I was badge number 2 and the first female out of the cadet program for Phoenix Police Department. So at 18. Yeah. And it was a program where it was supposed to be like almost like Explorers, if you've ever heard of the Explorer program. Mm-hmm. But this was a paid position and a full-time tuition reimbursement. I was supposed to be able to do college, paying tuition type of thing. And so it was a light blue shirt, driving a fully marked patrol car, no gun, baton, pepper spray, handcuffs, and a radio. And I was assigned to an area of town where after my initial training with an officer, I was kind of let go to only respond to accidents, not death accidents, but if it came out, accident, even sometimes accident with injury, recovering stolen vehicles, dusting for fingerprints and crime scenes, taking photos and doing female searches. But obviously driving a fully marked police car, I got flagged down. Again, I'm in the right place at the right time often, and there would be times where I would literally be in the right place at the wrong time for me because I wasn't yet a full sworn officer, just at 18 years old. So I did that from 18 to 20 and a half, and then went in the academy where I graduated 3 weeks after I had turned 21 to be sworn.
So during that time, now you don't have a police officer in the car with you. You're in the car by yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, after the initial training, there were definitely a good year that I was responding to those calls by myself.
So, what's the hairiest situation that you ran into during that time when you don't have a weapon other than a baton and some spray?
So it was, they called it the Rock Block at 24th Street and Broadway. They're totally redoing that area now, but this used to be a really bad part of Phoenix, South Phoenix, if you've ever been to Phoenix at all. But basically it was an accident with injuries that turned into a death accident. And it was a little girl that was a pedestrian hit by a car. And people from the neighborhood were coming out of the woodwork and they were wanting to attack the driver who hit her. And it was obvious that she jaywalked and it wasn't a pedestrian area to cross, and she crossed. And so it was totally an accident. And that was where I had to call for backup and have officers come out because they were initially getting verbal with him. And obviously I could foresee the future of how that was going to go if I didn't have someone else with me.
Oh, yeah. That can go bad extremely quickly, can it?
Yeah.
During that time, do you remember how many sworn officers they had on Phoenix PD?
Yeah. So what's crazy right now, and I'm part of the union, and so I still get like the updates of our count. Back then, when I first started with Phoenix Police Department, I think we had 3,200 officers.
Oh, really?
Well, it is the 5th largest city in the United States.
I'm shocked. I didn't know that. 3,200.
Yeah. I mean, we're not even landlocked. And the thing about Phoenix, if you ever come here, you'll be like underwhelmed by our downtown because we don't have like a whole bunch of high rises or anything, but we're just spread out.
I've actually been to the DEA office in Phoenix before when I was still on the
Okay.
job.
Yeah.
And the thing I remember most about Phoenix is walking from the hotel to the office and being warm, but not sweating. But then as soon as I stepped in the air conditioning, I was soaking wet.
Mm-hmm.
I never experienced anything like that.
Oh, yeah. But
You
thank
always
goodness
hear
for
about it.
AC.
Yeah, everybody says, "Oh, it's warm, but it's bearable." I'm thinking, well, hell, an oven's warm too, and I'm not going to jump in the damn oven.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No humidity. So, just out of curiosity, when you came on, you're the first female. You're the second member of this new Explorer type program. What was the reception from the Phoenix police officers that you dealt with?
I think I was taken under the wing of several really, really amazing officers, and not just because they probably knew and worked with my dad, but also because, it's a really young little girl out there doing dangerous stuff and not old enough to even respond how they would respond. So I was definitely taken care of and had lots of really good guidance.
What was your dad doing? Was he still in uniform patrol?
Not patrol, no. He was doing, I believe at that time, if you remember Dare and Great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great was like the gang education and prevention program. So Community Relations Bureau, basically. But he retired actually in 99 when I graduated the academy January of 99. So I went in September 98 for the sworn position. So transitioning from cadet trainee to sworn, and had to do like a different academy. And then he actually had the chief give me his badge. So that's the badge
nice.
I got to wear for my career as well.
When you retired, do you still have that badge?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you had your son. Is he an adult now?
Yep, he's 22.
And is he in law enforcement or no?
Oh, no, he wants nothing to do with the police. Part of that is, I wouldn't encourage anyone right now. It's bad. I mean, I'm sure you're aware. There's no love for law enforcement right now, and it's really scary. My heart breaks every time I hear, and it's almost daily, of an officer being killed. So it's really, really sad.
It's as bad, if not worse, than I've ever heard it. And I was a cop for 38 years.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. God bless the men and women out there in uniform, because you are literally a walking target right now.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. What the hell's wrong with people like us that we're willing to go do that for people we don't even know?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, and that's the whole purpose of Game of Crimes here, is to promote law enforcement and first responders and military in the most positive light, so that our listeners get to hear stories of heroism, of bravery, of sacrifice, of dedication, commitment. I mean, there's a long list of adjectives you could add to this. So that's the reason that my partner left, but that's why I want to keep running with Game of Crimes here, because my potential guest list is not any shorter than it was a year ago. It just keeps more and more names being added to it, because there are so many studs and studettes out there that step up to the plate and take on the responsibility. And just God bless them all.
Yes,
just ask
absolutely.
for his protection on everybody. So, and the other thing I want to say about your son, as long as he doesn't become a fireman, then it'll be okay, right?
Yeah, no, he's more into the computer stuff. So.
Oh, he's a smart one, huh?
Yes. And I'm trying to encourage him to do cybersecurity, because then it's kind of a little bit of a law enforcement thing.
Oh, yeah.
Where you're helping companies or, the government in a way that protects them digitally. So.
Oh, absolutely. And our listeners that have been on board for a while, that got to know Morgan Wright, my co-host on here and co-founder of Game of Crimes, he's a world-renowned cybersecurity expert. And that's kind of why he had to leave the show, because the company he works for, he's doing such a good job. They added responsibilities. They added additional travel on him. But they also added to his paycheck. So that made it lucrative for him. And Morgan, we miss you, brother. But we're still going to talk shit about you. AAA. He was, he was a trooper in Kansas. That's how I called him. I said, man, I started calling him AAA because I said, all you ever did was change tires and go get people gas.
Yeah.
So I'll teach him not to come on the show where I can pick on him and he can't get back at me now. He's pretty good at throwing it back. So I do miss having him on the show here. Okay, so let's see. You're on the PD now, and at 21, you got your gun now, right? And so you're not a newbie, but since you're carrying a weapon, you are kind of a newbie because now you're answering more violent calls. You're answering every call that comes along, no matter what it is, right? You're responsible for that.
Mm-hmm.
So then in Phoenix, I'm going to guess with that many officers, did they pair you up with a partner?
Well, that's a unique thing. Initially, no. In fact, when I was in officer in training, that's when Mark Atkinson was killed, and he was an officer that was ambushed. And what's unique about Mark is I was on his scene, but prior to Mark's death, we hadn't had an officer-involved shooting or an officer get killed for 8 years. And unfortunately, when that happened, that kind of marked like this almost yearly occurrence of officer-involved shootings or officer getting killed throughout the whole rest of my career. But initially, right when Mark was killed, they did try to do their best effort to have 2-man patrol every car, but it didn't last long, unfortunately. There's just the numbers now, I think we're down to like maybe a little bit over 2,500, so we're down a lot. And there's been, throughout my career, times when we've had detectives being assigned back to patrol because we didn't have enough people to answer 911. Right. Or there was instances in 2015, 2016, where they offered overtime, supplemental overtime. And I actually took advantage of a lot of that and worked my normal day's shift as an undercover and would put a uniform on and work all night long or on the weekend, so that we were there and available for 911. So it was kind of a unique thing that I learned how to be a cop again in 2015 because I had been out of it from 2008 to 2015 out of the uniform.
Yeah, and I always say that uniform, that's real police work. That's where you're rolling up on things in progress, or you're receiving calls to go answer the calls, and you really don't know what you're getting into. Dispatch tries to get as much information as they can, but a lot of times you just never know until you get there.
Yeah, as an undercover, obviously, I got used to not being seen and putting that uniform back on. People see you before you see them.
Yeah. Yes. Did you ever encounter this? I remember, so I worked in uniform for 6 years. And so you went to a department that had 3,500 officers, 3,200 officers. I went to a department that had 35 officers.
Oh.
A little small town in West Virginia.
I cannot relate.
Hey, if we had 5 guys on the street, that was a good night. But when you're out in public in uniform, people recognize the uniform, and they recognize you in the uniform. But then when you'd bump into these same people in your street clothes, they'd walk right by you and never even notice you. Did you ever encounter that?
I get it all the time. Literally, just last week, I had someone say, "You were not who I was expecting." When they had talked to me on the phone, then I showed up.
Yeah.
I think that makes me a better undercover.
That's a compliment. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to your academy days just for a second. How long was the Phoenix Police Academy?
So for me, it was 16 weeks, but it was not just Phoenix PD, so it was other surrounding cities. And then you had that was the general class, and then a more specific City of Phoenix Intensive Academy for another 3 weeks.
Oh, okay. And during that time, was everything perfect? Were you the perfect cadet? Or did you have some things happen that we might like to hear about?
I had obviously an advantage because I knew all of the radio codes. I knew a lot of the statutes, at least the statutes surrounding, the traffic codes for accident investigation and those kind of things. So I definitely had an advantage. I wouldn't say perfect. Obviously, the academy physically took a toll on me. Luckily, I made it through, but there were a lot of individuals in my class that, running 9 miles in the Arizona heat, it does stuff to your body, and injuries and things like that happen. But luckily, I made it through without any injuries. I was young enough still, I think. Uniquely, there was me turning 21 in the academy, and then there was a guy who lateraled over, but for whatever reason, he had to do the academy over again. He turned 54 in my academy class.
And he made it?
Yeah. Yeah, he was working for Glendale PD.
I got to ask you, did they make you run 9 miles?
Yeah, that was the last run of the academy, and it was up South Mountain.
Is that punishment, or is that like a graduation, or that's a rite of passage, or are they just
That's,
screwing with you one more time?
I mean, the trail runs and the running was a big part of the academy. And that last 9-mile run hike was kind of a rite of passage. Everyone had to do that. Yeah.
I can understand that. I know at the DEA Academy, you're on the Quantico Marine Corps base in Quantico, Virginia. And that last week, maybe week and a half, one of the things that they have everybody do is run the Yellow Brick Road, is what they call it. And that's the Marine Corps officers' obstacle course. For us, it was raining. You're running on tank trails. You're climbing slippery rocks with ropes. You're crawling down in the mud, in the water, under barbed wire, the things that the Marines go through. And then when, they want the class to act as a team. And so when you finished, we came back to the buses and they're like, okay, you guys going to ride the bus or you going to run back to the academy? And I'm thinking the bus sounds real good to me. And of course, a lot of the guys were like, no, we're going to run. And so when one runs, we all run. And we're running these
you guys got left.
We're running these muddy tank trails, and I remember stepping once, and I came out of my shoe, and I went back to get it, and I lost my other shoe. And, they're just sucked up in the mud, and I guess it's a fond memory now. But and I actually enjoyed the Yellow Brick Road. I thought it was a lot of fun. I didn't see it as that much of a physical challenge. I wasn't a stud by any means, but it was kind of a fun thing to do.
Oh, yeah. No, we had obstacle courses. Those were timed and you had to pass those or you weren't passing the academy. Yeah. I think the trail runs just were either punishment or obviously to keep up with the physical fitness. But the obstacle course, jumping the 6-foot wall, all of that was required.
Yeah. And you know what? You need that physical fitness because you get on the street, you're ready or you're going to get your ass handed to you.
Yes.
So I'm a big proponent of keeping up that with the PT. What I was kind of looking for is, were there any embarrassing moments or stories that, we might not hear anywhere else except while we got you here on Game of Crimes?
I mean, obviously the pepper spraying incidents are no fun. And I got pepper sprayed as a cadet also. So in that little academy, and then I had to do it again. And then I've been pepper sprayed out on patrol by my own partners before accidentally because they were spraying other people and I'm still standing there. So pepper spray is not my favorite thing.
It's not.
No.
Oh, that's horrible. That's one of the worst things you have to go through. Okay, so now, you're on patrol, and how long do you stay on patrol as a gun toter before you decide I want to try something different?
So you have to do 3 years of patrol before you can go to a specialty detail. And then a lot of the specialty details require detective certification. So obviously in that 2-3 years, right, in addition to learning how to be a cop, you probably need to go and get your classes if you want to lead patrol right away. So I ended up getting my detective certification and general instructor, and that really is what gives me the ability now as a presenter to have those skills to present, to teach at the academy, to do the teaching that I do now. So that was really good for me to knock out early on in my career because that helped me later on.
I think I saw on your website that you're Arizona Post certified.
Yeah, so I'm an instructor for Arizona Post and also California Post. But really, I could write a lesson plan and get a certification in any state.
Excellent. And can you just tell our listeners really quick what Post is?
The Peace Officer Standard and Training Bureau. So basically, each state has a organization that oversees the certifications for peace officers, and that is what that entity is. And they maintain, the officers that keep their certification or lose their certification, and then the continuing training that we have that's required every year.
So, and a lot of, I think in the corporate world, they'd probably call it in-service training hours.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you help them keep their job. That's a good thing.
Well, that, and then obviously in the academy, which is very, I'm sure, typical of officers that have been on a long time, I never got a class on human trafficking. We didn't even start teaching human trafficking until 2015. So you have a whole bunch of officers out there that never even thought to look for a trafficker, and these pens know it and they brag about it. So that was one of my main things is we've got to have this class in the academy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the last thing you want is, and this sounds, I don't mean this to sound macho or anything, but as a uniform officer, you've got to have respect on the street where people will try and run over you every single day. And if they think they're getting one over you because they're doing some crime that you're not even aware of, well, how much respect are you getting out of that?
Yeah, it's one of those where I think traffickers, pimps, they're one and the same thing, two different names, but pimps are extra nice to you as an officer. Go ahead and search my car, go ahead and do this, because they're not worried about getting caught for anything. Because as long as they control the mouth of those victims that are with them, no one's going to say anything, and it's not like they have drugs in the car or stolen property in the car. They're not going to get caught. And so they are very cooperative, and that should bother you. That's always been a sign for me, is if someone's really nice to me, that's the one I need to be paying attention to.
Yeah, you want to keep your hand on your wallet when you're around people like that, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
So you get your certifications now, and you've got, including your cadet time, how many years do you have on now that you're ready to step into your next role?
Well, so I was a cadet for about 2.5 years, and then I think I was in patrol for about 3.5 years before I went to SRO.
And what's SRO?
School Resource Officer.
Okay.
Yeah, and I did that because I had my son, and so I think that's something that a lot of female officers end up doing for at least a little part in their career. It wasn't what I was planning on doing, but it was what was convenient for me because obviously I had a newborn baby, and I ended up staying in SRO for 6 years. I blinked and 6 years went by.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah. And it wasn't on purpose. It was just, I really had a great time with the age group. And I think that actually helped me later on as a detective, investigating crimes against youth. And, having the rapport and being around 7th and 8th graders for several years, I really got to know that age group. So
you did, we call it junior high. Some places call it middle school. That's what you did for your SRO time?
Yes.
Excellent. I didn't know that part. That's, I look at those guys and ladies now, and I'm thinking, I'm not sure I could do that.
It was challenging. I mean, the first day that I showed up with the police car, they have a little parking spot out front so we can advertise the cops are here. My patrol car got tagged, "Fuck the cops," down the side of it. And I ended up chasing the guy. And I found him, and he had the little cap with the purple spray paint in his pocket.
Idiot. And he was a junior high kid?
No, he was a high school kid. He was just ditching or wasn't in school and decided to commit criminal damage on my patrol car. I got welcomed into the neighborhood.
Oh, what a moron. What an idiot.
Yeah.
And I hope he chose another path, career path, because being a criminal certainly wasn't going to work for him, was it?
Yeah.
Jeez. So I bet that was an interesting report when you had to go back to your sergeant or whoever your shift commander was and report to them while you're inside your car. I got spray painted.
Yeah, first day I messed up the car.
There are funny things that happen on the street. And a lot of what happened on the street stays on the street. So we won't go much too further down that road. So now, after 6 years as a school resource officer, what's next?
So that was when I, we don't get to take the patrol car home. So I had gone into the police station to turn the keys in, and I saw a girl in the juvenile holding area who I remembered when she was in 7th or 8th grade. She was still a juvenile on that day, and I was, passing by her, and then I turned around, went back, and I'm like, "Hey, I know you. Why are you in trouble?" And that's when she told me she was in trouble for prostitution, and that, that she and her boyfriend got caught, and, she had some attitude with the officers, and I was just blown away with this whole idea. And at that time, I'd already been a cop for 6, 7 years. 8 years, something like that. And so I was shocked that kids are getting involved in prostitution. And so about that same time, the unit, back then it was called Vice, had asked for female officers to come from patrol to work as an undercover prostitute on the street, walking the street. And so I started doing shadows and temporary assignments with them, doing that. And that's what really made me want to go and pursue moving to that unit.
Was this young girl, now, what role was her boyfriend playing? Was he playing the pimp?
Yeah, he was definitely the pimp. He was an adult and had been exploiting her.
And was he arrested also?
Yes.
Do you know what happened to their cases?
I didn't follow it because at that time I was still at the school, but I do know that she went missing a couple more times. I did participate in trying to find her at a hotel once. It's one of those where she was loyal to him, and even though may have disclosed on that day about him trafficking her, without her cooperation, I don't think he was ever charged with anything, because that's kind of what happens in some of these cases.
Just heartbreaking. I mean,
Yeah.
being a father of two daughters, I just can't imagine.
Yeah.
Just can't
I mean,
even
there's
imagine.
things we do now, like now that I've been where I've been, I have had that happen to me multiple times as a detective, where the victim initially wants to press charges, we do all this work, and then they bow out. And unfortunately, if I don't have that victim to testify in court, it is as though this thing never happened, except for now we've evolved into doing financial investigations against these traffickers. And if we're charging them with money laundering and illegal enterprise, the state is the victim. I don't need a victim, and I will be able to pursue them for those felonies.
Excellent. Excellent. Do you remember how old that little girl was when she first got involved in this?
I remember on that day she was 16, and I knew her when she was probably 13.
And so this adult comes along and he schmoozes her. I mean, did she come from a broken home, or do you know any of the background there?
Her family situation was parents were non-English speaking, and so she was the only English speaking, she and her siblings. And so those types of situations, as a school resource officer, I noticed those kids kind of run that household, and they run the show, and they do whatever the hell they want to do. And unfortunately, she had run away a couple of times, and the parents don't know how to call the police or how to report her as a runaway, or if they do, they don't know all the ins and outs of where she could have gone. Yeah.
Were they Spanish speaking or a different language?
Yeah, Spanish speaking.
Okay. Wow. It's heartbreaking. This is going to get worse as we go along here. Hey, players, this is the end of part 1. As you know, part 2 comes out tomorrow on a Tuesday. In the meantime, on social media, go and check us out on X at Game of Crimes, and on Facebook and Instagram at Game of Crimes Podcast. Also on Facebook, type in Game of Crimes fan page and join us for some more fun. Our website is gameofcrimespodcast.com. We've got a lot more information there, including all our episodes, the book list, which contains the books written by our guests, Game of Crimes merchandise, and a lot more. In the meantime, everybody stay safe. We'll see you tomorrow for part 2.